exactly when it's going to start recording. So I just sort of ramble for a few seconds until I see the time start. So here we go. Hello, everybody. I am your host, Eric Smith, and we are jumping right into my favorite horror with author of such things as Brain Eater Jones and the Hematophages, and his latest work, which he co-authored with Wiley Young, is Clickers Never Die. Right there it is. And he steps up when you need him. It's Stephen Kozeniewski.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me, Eric.
Thank you for being here, and thank you once again for stepping up. Everybody's getting ready for Scares the Care AuthorCon, and I've had people say, yeah, I'd love to be on the show, but it's going to have to wait. And I was afraid I was going to have a dead week or two with no content, and you stepped up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely going to be there. Are you going to be there too?
Unfortunately, I'm not.
So that's too bad. You could have gotten a bunch of interviews down there probably with a little bit more uncensored after people get into their cups.
Yes. It Scares the Care is my holy grail of cons. Someday I'm going to make it. But I have yet to make it to any Scares the Care type con.
Oh, it's great. It's a complete family atmosphere. You'll show up and immediately, people will be waving you into conversations and stuff. I remember last year I showed up and I know Jeff Strand. I've met him here and there. And I was just kind of wandering around like a lost puppy in the lobby on, I think, Wednesday or Thursday night. And he just waved me over and like pushed the chairs aside and was like, oh, come sit, hang out with us. It's great.
Yeah, I've had some people they're like, you've got to get there. Mike Lombardo, Aaron Dries has said it. I think he's been there at least once. Some other people, and they're just like, yeah, you've got to get here. And it's always just a matter of I'm either working or don't have the cash, but someday I will be there. Now, are you gonna have a table? Or are you doing any panels? What are your plans for the weekend?
Yes, I'm going to have a table the entire weekend, so you'll be able to find me there most of the time. And then I'm doing 2 panels, and let me just double check on the dates and times. But the first one is going to be a future. I think it's like the future of splatterpunk or something like that. Okay, that's Friday evening at 7:30, and that is going to be stuffed. I probably won't be able to get a word in edgewise, but it's good stuffed. It's Wrath James White, C.V. Hunt, Triana, Wes Southard, Carver Pike, Aaron Beauregard, Daniel Volpe, the whole team. And then on Saturday, we're at 10:15. We're doing the Carnival of Chaos, which is going to be 4 or 5 of us doing some readings and some craziness. I think it'll be closer to a bizarro event than horror, but people like that too. So we'll see.
Nice. Well, unfortunately, this isn't going to go up until after the weekend. So can you predict the future? Do you have any predictions for what's going to happen this coming weekend at Scares the Care AuthorCon?
Well, I can make a guarantee, which is that, the charity is going to help out 3 very worthy individuals. So that's a guarantee. That's probably the only thing I can guarantee. Well, no, I can also guarantee that a lot of people are going to get sloppy drunk, profess eternal love and maybe eternal hate. And there'll be fights and there'll be love and joy and a lot of karaoke probably. And we're really hoping a lot of books sold. And I know this is Brian Keane's baby, and he really wants it to be a big success. So I'm hoping that it's just, packed like crazy. That's what I'm hoping for in the future.
Yeah, this is the one I really wish I could go to because he keeps pushing that. He wants to make this one special and successful so that they can do it again. But like I said, unfortunately, it just doesn't always work out. We're working extra hours at work.
Yeah. So what do you do for the day job?
I build Transformers.
Like the toys?
Unfortunately,
like Optimus
not
Prime?
the cool kind.
Okay.
The kind that blow up too often. Never the ones that I build. Yeah, no, big electrical transformers from little tiny ones to huge giant ones. So that's what I do, and it's the company. I love the work. Not a fan of the company always, and it's very erratic because they're not very good at getting material in things. So we'll work 55, 60 hours one week and then not even make 40 the next week because they don't have the material.
Right.
And then the material comes in and they want you to work 60 again. So unfortunately, this is not 60 this week, but a lot of hours we're working this week.
Oh, yeah.
Excuse me. I do try to help out. Like I said, I've never made it there, but I have a Scares the Care T-shirt, and I believe that money goes to the charity. Last year, I bought a bunch of raffle tickets for the Joe Lansdale chapbook, which I won.
Good.
And then I had to give the copy I had already bought to my nephew. But spreading the Joe Lansdale love.
Yeah, of course.
So yeah, I try. I've just made donations because it is really a worthy charity. Now, do you happen to know, just off the top of your head, can donations be made throughout the year, or is it
I do
generally around convention time?
I do, and the answer is yes. And I know that they're trying to get the word out. I have absolutely no connection to the convention except that I'm a big fan and I like to be a vendor and sometimes a guest. But so I'm not speaking for Joe or the board or anything, but I know that they're trying to get away from people thinking of it as a convention or a series of conventions or a series of events, but because they are a year-round, they're a charity. They're a registered charity, like I don't know, Red Cross or something like that, and they do accept donations year-round. So, like we were saying earlier, you guys will be listening to this after the April ones ended, but before the August one has started. Even so, even if you're in that period, you can always go to that scaresthatcares.org and make a donation. And they also have a variety of pop-up events. If it does go out of your mind, like take this opportunity, pause the podcast and go make the donation. But if it does go out of your mind, they'll also have pop-up events, and part of that is to remind you to go in and, oh, you know what, I meant to do that when I heard Kozeniewski and Smith talking about it, but here, let's do it now.
Yeah, I will say I'll put a link for the charity in the description below, and suggest people follow Brian Keane on Twitter, follow Scares the Care, so that you're kept up to date on any of these pop-up events or anything else. But at the very least, we'll have that link for the charity in the description so people can just go and check it out and donate. And they typically, if I'm not mistaken, every time it's 3 people or families specifically that they donate, that they give the money to. And I know there's been people with cancer. There's been burn victims. Other stuff that I can't remember.
I think it's breast cancer. One is breast cancer and one is pediatric cancer, and then a burn victim or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they choose the 3 people or families that they're giving it to. I don't know how twice a year that I don't know how often they distribute the money. But it goes out to, we don't have the details.
That one I don't know, but yeah.
Like I said, check out the scaresthatcare.org. But yeah, it's going to specific people. And I know that at one point Brian said he was, I believe, posting the sort of transparency numbers showing exactly where things were going and how much and all of that.
Yeah.
So it's it's a very good cause. And I wish I could be there. But I need a huge one of those big giant bags with the dollar bill on the side for all the books I know I'm going to buy.
Right.
Aside from, transportation and lodging, you got to have money to buy those books.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to set that aside.
All right. Um, now, I didn't plan for this to be a gotcha interview,
Mm,
but I have you here, and I have to ask the hard-hitting question.
okay.
And I just remembered, it just popped into my head at work today, but I have to know. I don't mean to put you on the spot. Where's my techno vampire novel?
Oh, the Teslins from Hunter of the Dead, right?
Yes.
Yes, I was surprised at how much people loved that. So, wow, I guess it's going on 6 years ago that it was published. Was Hunter of the Dead, which was my sort of straight vampire novel, and Hematophages is of course my sci-fi vampire novel. And within it, we had a couple of factions or houses, and one of them was the ones that were obsessed with technology, and the fact that since you're a vampire, you could cut off your hand and replace it with a laser beam or whatever. And they were very much like I don't want to say throwaway, but they were kind of like minor. They were kind of mentioned in the background.
Yeah, they play a very small, if
Very
any,
small
actual
role. Yeah.
role, but
But
they just fascinate me.
everybody loved them. Yeah, everybody was excited about them. Um, yeah, I'll have to revisit that. Maybe I'll try and get a novella out this year for that.
There you go.
Yeah, I've definitely got a novel I'm actively working on, which is going to be kind of. I told Christopher Triana that he inspired it because it's going to be my first with no paranormal or science fiction elements. It's just going to be purely like, oh shit, this could happen. Um, and so yeah, as soon as I finish that, all right, I'll put that on the big board. The test list.
Yes. All right. I've accomplished something, hopefully. Um, yeah, I just uh, Hunter of the Dead was my introduction to your work. I was a reviewer that was on the list. Was that Sam Hain?
Sinister Grin.
Sinister Grin.
Yep.
Okay. I couldn't because I was on a couple lists. Couldn't remember which one it was. So that was I got a review copy to read, and of course loved it. My review I had to check 5 years ago, but yeah, for some reason I was at work just doing my thing, letting my mind wander, and I was like, I gotta ask about those tech vampires.
Yep.
Um, all right, now your bio. I was looking at the bio in the back of your new book, Clickers
Hmm.
Never Die, and was looking online, and I couldn't find a lot of information about you. Just like plenty of stuff about your books and that you where you live and that you have cats and things. But and I'm not super internet savvy. I can't go digging super deep. So I'm just curious just about Stephen, the person. When you're not writing, when you're not preparing to go to a charity convention, what is it you do? What do you do in your downtime? Do you have any hobbies, other interests?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Um, well, yeah, like you said, I'm from Pennsylvania. Initially I'm from Philly, and I went to college in Lancaster, which is, not that far from Philly. Um, Joined the army. I spent a couple years in Oklahoma. I spent 1 year in Iraq. When I came back, I moved more towards the center of the state. It's kind of weird because I always wanted to go back to Philadelphia, but then just things just kept kind of falling into my lap with my personal life and that kind of thing. So I ended up in Harrisburg, which is like central Pennsylvania, and it just so happens to also be the mecca of a certain breed of splatterpunk horror authors.
Yes.
So they've kind of been keeping me here for a while. Um, but a lot of my time, so I mean, I have a day job. I work for the Navy now, which is weird coming from the Army. Um, but I did like, I do like that structure, of a federal job. My girlfriend and other people, they're always like, you don't even know what it's like in the private sector. You could get fired at the drop of a hat, and you could get da, 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 da. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I don't want to find out what that's like. I like that there's some structure, and there's good things and there's bad things, but I kind of like it. So that's been good to pay the rent and that kind of thing. And then a couple years ago, my girlfriend was a florist, and then she became a balloon designer. So like whenever I say that, everyone's always like, "Oh, can you make me a sword? Can you make me a doggy?" And I'm like, I want to clarify, it's not balloon animals. It's like centerpieces and arches and that kind of thing for if you had an office party or if you had a wedding or something. So it's very much like hand and fist with floral design. Like they very much complement each other. And maybe after about 2-3 years of doing that, her boss was selling the business. And I said, I have a little money set aside. Why don't we become, balloon tycoons? So my third job is, doing the books and stuff for the balloon shop. So in between that, I work 8 hours a day. Then I have to, take care of the balloon, the taxes and bookkeeping, that kind of thing for the balloon shop. And every once in a while I get to, go on deliveries and that kind of thing when they can't find a decent artist. They'll be like, oh, get the accountant guy. So that doesn't, and then I'll be like, oh, maybe I have a few minutes to write tonight. So that doesn't leave me with a ton of downtime. But I like to do Warhammer modeling. One of the things I'm still waiting for is Wiley Young, my co-author of Clickers Never Die. He's supposed to be getting us figurines, like a Clicker and a Dark One figurine. And so I was planning on at some point showing everybody how I would paint a figurine. That's what I like to do with what free time I have.
Nice. Didn't they have the figurines if you bought the Thunderstorm edition?
Yes, they went out with the Thunderstorm edition, and he's been giving them out at conventions and stuff, so they've been out there a little bit.
Very cool. So I have to ask now, Warhammer or Warhammer 40K?
Warhammer.
Okay.
I know that puts me about 8 years behind the times because there is no Warhammer anymore. Now it's Age of Sigmar, which I have not gotten into. But yeah, I have a big old orc and goblin army.
Nice. Do you ever read any of the Warhammer books?
Oh hell yeah. I of course, I read Gotrek and Felix. That's kind of like you've got to. And I realized when I started, I got a bunch of omnibuses and I started reading it, and I realized oh, I've actually read a bunch of these already because they were out as like short stories and stuff in the beginning. And then I hesitate to call him a friend, but an acquaintance of mine who I think is a really great author, Guy Haley. Guy Haley wrote the Skarsnik book, which I think was probably the first time they did an actual Orcs and Goblins book. I loved that. And then just recently, oh God, I feel terrible because I forget who the author is, but I did read a 40K book that was also a Space Orcs book. Sorry, I'm kind of limited in my Warhammer interest. Like I know everybody loves the Caiaphas Cain and all the Imperial stuff, and I'm just like wah daka daka daka. But
I'm limited myself. I would have guessed that like Horus Heresy would be the biggest thing, and I'm a Dan Abnett fan.
Yes.
And he's done a lot of that stuff. I have not read, or I've read a fraction of what he's done. I became a fan of his with his comic book work, and I actually have some of his comic book novels that he's written, and I've read some of his just like original stuff that's not related to anything. And now, have you checked out any of that, the new horror line that they have?
I did. Um, they actually they got me. I think maybe a year or two ago they put out an open call for short story for it was for like Halloween, and I wrote a couple stories. I wrote a piece that was going to be like a Skaven sort of a Lovecraft pastiche where instead of it's the rats in the walls, it's the Skaven in the walls. And you know, I wrote a couple of pieces, and of course, I looked at their open call, and it said, you know, the best way to be aware of how the Age of Sigmar and the world of Warhammer 40K works is to read a bunch of the novels. I was like, you know what, you're right, and they got me. I read, oh God, what was it called? It was an Age of Sigmar novel where they were all trapped in a castle, and there was just one witch hunter, and I think there was a bloodletter or something that like the lord of the manor had invited a bunch of his enemies to dinner, and then he had like killed himself and like summoned a bloodletter or something and like put wards on the doors, and just one of them was a witch hunter, and he was like, oh well, I will try to protect you all. What the heck was the name of that?
Interesting. I'm gonna have to look for that.
I'll find it.
Now, I've never, while you're looking, I've never played the miniatures game, but I have had a number of board games.
Like Hero Quest and
I
Mordheim.
had one that I can't remember the name of it, but the board looked like stretched skin, and each player was like a demon lord or something, and it was almost like Risk, where it was an area control game, but you're just doing these horrible Warhammer horrendous bloody things to each other. And I had one that you had these discs. So it was almost like a miniatures game, but your troops were on these discs, and you moved them and figured out range by, like, if your disc could move 3, you'd flip the disc 3 times. And
Okay.
that was its movement. Disc Wars. I swear it was like Warhammer Disc Wars, something like that.
Huh.
But there's a lot of like board games for those who don't want to invest in all the miniatures, things, everything.
Okay,
so I've enjoyed those.
I found it.
Okay.
The horror one was called Castle of Blood by C.L. Werner.
Mm-hmm.
And the Space Orc one I was talking about is Brutal Cunning, like Brutal Cunning, but with a K. That's the way the orcs talk for the orcs never have G's for your audience. And that's by Mike Brooks.
Okay. I'm trying to think of another one that I had that I feel like was a card game with really great art. Can't remember what it was. Are you familiar with Aconite Books?
I'm not sure I am.
They do a lot of intellectual properties. I can look right over here and see I have a whole stack. They first caught my eye because they're the new publisher of Arkham Horror novels.
Okay.
And they're publishing a ton of original Marvel comic book novels. And but they've also they do Assassin's Creed, Descent, which is a miniature dungeon crawl kind of thing, Zombicide. But a number of the authors have written Warhammer. I think David Geimer is one of them. I'm looking at his name on one of the books, and I think he's one that, like, if you look at his, also there's like a ton of Warhammer stuff. Right. So some of those authors stretching their wings into other intellectual properties. Yeah. I'm going nuts with the Aconite books. I got a whole stack of them. I just got 3 more recently. But excuse me, yeah, the Warhammer stuff is pretty cool. Now, do you say you paint the miniatures and everything? Do you get a chance to play?
I haven't in ages. I used to, weirdly, I played a lot when I was in the army. And I just haven't played in years.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're busy with everything else.
Yeah, that's true.
So, fortunately, I don't have a second business or anything. I just have the day job and then doing things like this and reviewing books. So, I'm addicted to tabletop games and board games. None of the big giant miniatures games where you have to have the tape measure to measure out your distances and everything. But tons of different stuff. And some miniatures that have the simple, it's like line of sight and is real simple, and 2 squares away is your range, so you don't have to measure that stuff.
Right.
But all right, let's see. So that covers you as a person. Let's talk a little bit about Clickers Never Die, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, first of all, how does one address your co-author? What do you call him?
I call him Wiley. I mean, I know his real name. So
Right. We don't need to.
I call him by his real name, but I always say Wiley.
Wiley.
Yeah.
So basically, is the first name and middle initial that we have on the cover. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, the reason I do that is because his name obviously comes from Wile E. Coyote. I've never heard anyone say Wile when they were referring to him. I always hear them say, "Oh, it's Roadrunner Wile E." So
right. And you also, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be wrong because I'm old and my memory doesn't always work, this is not your first collaboration. Mm-hmm. You had, I believe it's The Perfectly Fine House.
Correct.
Okay. Are these the only 2 things that the 2 of you have worked on up to this point?
Yes. And of course, I had Slash Viver with Stevie Kopis.
Right. What's your collaboration process like? I know different people do it in different ways. So let's say for this one, what was the process like?
So the first thing we did, and it's nice that I get to meet with Wiley, a couple times a year, either in social settings or conventions, that kind of thing. So what we usually do is we'll start out with a brainstorming session. It's really more of a bullshitting session. And that way we can kind of get our ideas out. So actually in both of these cases, Perfectly Fine House and Clickers, there was kind of a lot of world building to do. Because with Perfectly Fine House, we're like, okay, we have to cover an entire concept of a world where ghosts are accepted. So we were like, how does this affect religion? How does this affect the economy? How does this affect everything?
Right.
So we had to do a ton of world building on that. Clickers was different because there's all the existing Clickers books. So we had to kind of talk about what are we going to touch on? What are we not going to touch on? What are the things that are, kind of indispensable and you can't have a Clickers book without it? So, there's like we did some of the kind of political caricatures and things, and we're like, that ties right into Clickers too. And, we were talking about, obviously, with any munch out type novel, like Tremors or anything like that, there's always how do they evolve? So we were like, okay, this time, how are they going to evolve? What's too far? What's too much? Are we going to have smart clickers? Are we going to have, 1,000-armed clickers or whatever?
I'm just going to interrupt for a second. There's no such thing as too far.
Tell Wiley that, yeah.
Please continue.
So we had a nice brainstorming session. And then I think well, pretty much with Perfectly Fine House, I sat down and I think I wrote the Bible kind of by myself. I might be lying, but I think I pretty much wrote the Bible by myself. And with this one, we actually traded the Bible back and forth because we talked about, what we did in both cases was we kind of split up the characters, and we weren't real like fastidious about it, but I was pretty much like, here's my characters and what I want to do with them, and he was like, here's my characters and what I want to do with them, and then we just had to integrate those. So the Perfectly Fine House was real clear cut. I was just like, look, I'm gonna have one character, you're gonna have the sister, I'll be the brother, you be the sister, and we'll trade off chapters. With this one, I think we had maybe 5 or 6 viewpoint characters. And so we, by and large, got the Bible knocked out. And then we actually handed off the manuscript back and forth pretty much when we got to the chapters that were no longer our characters. So, I mean, there were a couple times when I was like, I don't know, I wrote myself into a hole, do something with this. But by and large, I was like, I have the castaway and I have the Japanese commander, and then I'll do a chapter with the castaway, then I'll hand it back to him because he has the Marine, lieutenant is one of his characters. Then he'll hand it back to me. So we bashed out a first draft like that. And then he actually did a lot more work on the first draft than I did, because he had the pretty much the entire American side. There's the Japanese side and the American side in World War II, and I largely took the framing story in the Japanese side and the one castaway, and then he largely took the whole American side of the troops on Guadalcanal. So he ended up writing a lot more. But then he handed it back to me, and I went back and I edited the heck out of every page. So there is a lot, even in his chapters, that was my writing, and vice versa. So yeah, that was pretty much our process.
Well, now look, this is a safe space. You're more than welcome to admit that Wiley is a slacker and you did most of the work. I'm just putting it out there, if that's what you need to say.
No, I mean, I bust his chops a lot, but I actually think this one was pretty well even. Like I said, I did the lion's share of the editing, but he did the lion's share of the writing, so I think it evened out in the end.
Now, why or how did you come to the decision to set this in World War II?
Well, there's a couple of moving pieces with that. So what happened was Brian Keane came to us, and he said basically what his concept that he wants to do is to resurrect the clickers as something to help benefit J.F. Gonzalez's family.
Mm-hmm.
So, J.F. Gonzalez passed away in I think 2014, and his wife and daughter, they benefit from his literary estate. So he said, what I'd really like to do is take some of these properties that have, he's like, yeah, I put Clickers is back on the market, Survivor's back on the market. What I'd like to do though is to reboot and reinvigorate these properties, and then you guys will get paid for that. But then everybody that says, oh, what's this Clickers Never Die? Let me go back and buy the first 3 books. That'll kind of reinvigorate the Gonzalez estate, So part of that plan was that they would be writing partners and that the books would get handed off. So I don't know if I'm allowed to announce this, but whatever. So we knew it was going to be me and Wiley for the first book, and the second book is going to be Jeff Strand and Kenzie Jennings.
Oh, that is exciting.
So that'll be a real good book. And the other thing that Brian told us was you can reboot it. It's got to be a reboot. It's not taking place in the Prime Clickers universe where, Phillipsport was destroyed and et cetera, et cetera. So, and then you need to hand it off to Jeff and Kenzie. So we were talking about it, and we're like, well, we can do whatever we want. Phillipsport doesn't have to be destroyed in 2001, and all this other stuff that's happened in the Clickers novels. Like, we don't have to abide by that. So we said, okay, let's set up where it's 2020, 2021, that time frame, in a framing story, and the Clickers have just returned. By the end of the novel, Clickers and Dark Ones have just returned. Then we can hand off to Kenzie and Jeff, and they can do whatever they want with their modern novel. But since that's only so interesting, we're like, we want to have a World War II, be the bulk of the story. So it's basically, there's a character who's sort of like James Cameron or Jacques Cousteau or something, and he goes and he discovers that there were actually Clickers at the Battle of Guadalcanal, which was like a closely guarded secret. So we have all the World War II stuff, and we thought it was just great because I don't think that's quite been done in the Clickers series. There's been a lot of the military fighting the Clickers and that kind of thing, but never the Clickers show up in the middle of a war, and the two sides have to find some form of truce or peace and figure out what they're going to do. So we thought that would be interesting. We thought that would be an interesting setting.
Great. I was so excited. I had no idea that the paperback was coming out so soon. And as soon as I saw, I assume it was you or somebody on Twitter or social media that was like, hey, it's out now. And I was like, all right, time to make an Amazon order. Good. Absolutely have to have it. Great cover.
Thank you. And that was Dave Kendall, who also did the original covers.
I have this weird and it's funny that you mentioned Jeff Strand, because I discovered Clickers, the original, by accident. I was on Amazon, I was looking at stuff, looking through recommendations, and somehow this weird, I have where is it? The pink logo, old, Clickers, that popped up, and I love killer animal stories. So, and a fan of Jeff Gonzalez, so I grabbed the original Clickers. And of course I have all of the other stuff. But right after I bought Clickers,